The observation deck of Starbase Nexus 7 offered an unparalleled view of the swirling nebula beyond its reinforced windows, but Krelthak wasn't interested in the celestial display. His 6 golden eyes were fixed on the beings moving through the crowded promenade below, particularly the humans. They were everywhere on this station, scurrying about like the insignificant creatures they surely were. Krelthak's crystalline scales shifted, reflecting the ambient light as he adjusted his position on the heated lounger. The Vorkath Empire had taught him since hatching that they were the apex predators of the galaxy, yet here they were, forced to maintain diplomatic relations with species that barely qualified as sentient by their standards. The human female at the diplomatic desk had smiled at him when processing his travel documents. Smiled, as if he were some harmless tourist rather than a warrior of the most feared species in known space. His claws instinctively extended, scratching fine lines into the lounger's metallic surface. "Sir," a mechanical voice chirped, "damage to station property incurs a fine-off." Silence. Krelthak growled at the maintenance drone, which promptly retreated. Even the machine tier lacked proper respect. A commotion from the lower level drew his attention. A human child had fallen, scraping its knee on the deck plating. Rather than allowing natural selection to take its course, nearby adults immediately rushed to assist. Weakness supporting weakness. It was almost painful to watch. His mission here was simple: prove to the Vorkath High Command that humans were nothing more than prey species that had somehow fooled the galaxy into treating them as equals. The evidence was everywhere: their soft skin, their lack of natural weapons, their need for constant mutual support. They were prey, and he would prove it. Krelthak had spent months studying their movements, their habits, their supposed achievements. The humans claimed to have fought off 3 separate invasion attempts before joining the Galactic Council, but he knew better. Those stories had to be propaganda, clever misdirection to hide their fundamental weakness. A group of human engineers walked past his position, discussing some modification to the station's power grid. They were so absorbed in their conversation that they didn't even notice him, a fatal mistake for any truly sentient species. No Vorkath would ever be so unaware of an apex predator in their midst. His translator implant picked up fragments of their discussion, something about improving efficiency by 43% and revolutionary application of quantum tunneling. More deception, surely. Their technological achievements had to be borrowed or stolen from truly advanced species. How else could prey animals achieve spaceflight? The station's artificial day cycle began to shift toward evening, and Krelthak rose from his lounger. He had chosen his first target carefully, a human security officer who worked the night shift in the lower maintenance sectors. The irony of targeting one of their supposed protectors appealed to his sense of poetry. As he made his way toward the habitat ring, Krelthak's mind wandered to the glory that awaited him. Once he proved humans were prey, the Empire would finally acknowledge his wisdom. Perhaps they would even name him Truth Seeker, an honor reserved for those who revealed fundamental truths about the universe. The fact that humans made up nearly 30% of the Galactic Council's peacekeeping forces meant nothing. The fact that they had repeatedly demonstrated remarkable resilience and adaptability meant nothing. The fact that even the dreaded Swarm Collective had signed a non-aggression pact with them meant nothing. All of it had to be an elaborate deception, and he would be the one to expose it. What Krelthak failed to notice, as he confidently strode toward his destiny, was the small drone that had observed his reaction to the human child. He also failed to notice the subtle change in the station's security patterns, or the way certain pedestrians began moving with just a bit more purpose. Most importantly, he failed to notice that he had already made his first mistake. He had revealed his intent before ever striking a blow. The hunt was indeed about to begin, but not in the way Krelthak imagined. As the artificial night fell over Nexus 7, wheels were already in motion that would teach him exactly why humans had survived long enough to reach the stars, and why assuming they were prey was the last mistake so many others had made before him. The maintenance tunnels of Nexus 7's lower levels were dimly lit and eerily quiet, perfect hunting grounds for a Vorkath warrior. Krulfak moved silently through the shadows, his crystalline scales adjusted to absorb rather than reflect light. His target, Security Officer Sarah Chen, was due to make her rounds in exactly 7 minutes. He had spent 3 days studying her routine. She always walked the same path, checked the same junctions, and spent precisely 43 minutes completing her inspection of this sector. Such predictability was yet another sign of prey behavior. No proper predator would ever be so routine. The soft echo of boots on metal reached his auditory membranes. Right on schedule. Krulfak's muscles tensed as he prepared to strike. One quick demonstration of Vorkath's superiority, and then he would begin documenting his proof for the High Command. Officer Chen rounded the corner, her handheld scanner sweeping methodically across the corridor's systems. She was small, even for a human, which only reinforced Krulfak's certainty in his success. He waited until she passed his position, then launched himself from his hiding spot with practiced grace. What happened next would haunt his nightmares for years to come. Chen dropped into a roll before he even touched her, his claws slicing through empty air. As he landed, she was already up and facing him, her routine scanner revealed as a cleverly disguised weapon. The maintenance tunnel filled with the sharp crack of a neural disruptor, and Krulfak's left side went numb. Hostile in Section 7G. Chen spoke calmly into her comm unit as she sidestepped his increasingly uncoordinated attacks. Species: Vorkath. Attempting non-lethal containment. Krulfak's pride wouldn't allow him to retreat, even as his tactical training screamed that something had gone terribly wrong. He lunged again, bringing his superior mass to bear. Chen slipped inside his guard like water through crystal and struck 3 precise points on his thorax. Pain exploded through his nervous system as previously unknown pressure points were expertly targeted. Interesting, she commented, maintaining a perfect defensive stance. Your species' pressure points are almost exactly where the manual said they'd be. You should really thank the Vorkath expatriates who helped update our defense protocols. The revelation that members of his own species had helped train these prey animals hit harder than any physical blow. Krulfak's next attack was pure rage, all technique forgotten. Chen used his own momentum to send him crashing into the corridor wall, his scales crackling against the metal. Response team is 2 minutes out, she continued, as if she were discussing the station's maintenance schedule. Would you like to surrender now, or should we continue this impromptu demonstration of human combat capabilities? Krulfak's answer was a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. He charged again, determined to prove that this had to be some sort of trick. Humans were prey. They had to be prey. If they weren't prey, then everything he believed about his place in the galaxy was wrong. Chen sighed, almost sympathetically. The hard way it is, then. She pressed something on her wrist computer, and suddenly the corridor's artificial gravity shifted. Krulfak found himself flailing as his carefully practiced combat techniques, all designed for normal gravitational conditions, became worse than useless. A little trick we learned from the Centaurians, Chen explained as she easily navigated the shifting gravity field. Amazing what you can learn when you don't assume you're superior to everyone else. The last thing Krulfak saw before the neural disruptor finally rendered him unconscious was the arrival of the response team. All of them human, all of them moving with the same deadly grace as Chen. His last conscious thought was a horrifying realization. He hadn't been hunting prey at all. He had been testing their defenses, and they had been ready for him. When he awoke in a holding cell, the true magnitude of his error began to sink in. The cell's force field was specifically calibrated to Vorkath physiology. The temperature was kept just cool enough to make him sluggish without causing actual harm. Even the air pressure had been adjusted to minimize his strength while remaining within safe parameters. They had known. Somehow, they had known exactly what he was planning, and they had let him proceed anyway. But why? As Krulfak contemplated this question, he didn't notice the subtle psychological warfare at play. How the cell was designed to gradually break down his assumptions about human capabilities, how each security measure demonstrated an intimate understanding of his species' weaknesses. He was still trying to rationalize his failure when the interrogator arrived. The human male who entered the security center looked more like a scholar than a warrior, which Krulthak's prejudices told him had to be another deception. The human sat down at the monitoring station and smiled, that same infuriating expression of apparent friendliness that Krulthak had come to despise. The escape from Nexus 7's detention center had been humiliatingly easy. Too easy, Krulthak realized now, as he crouched in the cargo hold of a departing merchant vessel. They had wanted him to escape. The thought made his scales bristle with indignation. The interrogator, who had introduced himself as Dr. Marcus Wells, had spent 3 days systematically dismantling every one of Krulthak's beliefs about human weakness. He had shown footage of human special forces in action, documentation of their military victories, and historical records of their rise to prominence in the galaxy. But Krulthak had dismissed it all as propaganda. Then Wells had done something truly cruel. He had started showing Krulthak proof of how humans had earned the respect of other predator species. The ravagers of Antares had once considered humans prey too, until a single human ship crew managed to capture their flagship. The dread swarm had assumed humans would be easy to assimilate, only to discover that human neural pathways were uniquely resistant to their control. When the power to his cell had mysteriously failed, Krulthak had seized his chance to escape. Now, 3 days later, he was beginning to understand his mistake. Every time he accessed a computer terminal, human intelligence networks got closer to tracking him. Every time he tried to contact his people, the messages were intercepted. He wasn't escaping. He was being herded. The ship's engines changed pitch, signaling their approach to the frontier trading post. Krulthak needed to find a way to shake his pursuers and prove that his original assessment of humans had been correct. One failure didn't invalidate his theory. He just needed to choose a better target, plan more carefully. As he slipped off the merchant ship and into the crowded spaceport, his enhanced senses picked up signs that something was wrong. The crowds moved too purposefully. The security patrols were too precise in their movements. And there, at the edges of his vision, he caught glimpses of figures that moved with predatory grace. "Target is moving through Section C," a voice whispered in perfectly accented Vorkath. "Remember, non-lethal takedown only. Command wants him for demonstration purposes." Krulthak's blood ran cold. They were using his own language to coordinate his capture, and they weren't even trying to hide it from him. This wasn't just pursuit, it was psychological warfare. He ducked into a maintenance shaft, his heart's pounding. The humans had learned from their prey, he realized. Like the pack hunters of their homeworld, they were wearing him down, pushing him toward exhaustion, using his own fear against him. A shadow moved at the end of the tunnel. "You know," said a familiar voice, "for someone who claims humans are prey, you're displaying classic prey behavior right now." It was Officer Chen, somehow ahead of him despite his head start. Krulthak turned to retreat, only to find Dr. Wells blocking his other escape route. Running, hiding, looking for escape routes, Wells noted clinically. Very prey-like responses, wouldn't you agree? "I am Vorkath." Krulthak roared, his pride overwhelming his tactical sense. "We are the apex predators of the galaxy." "Are you?" Chen asked, her tone genuinely curious. "Because from where I'm standing, you're cornered in a maintenance tunnel, running from creatures you considered prey. That doesn't sound very apex predator to me." The worst part was that she didn't even sound mocking. There was actual concern in her voice, as if she were genuinely worried about his psychological state. It was the final insult. His supposed prey was pitying him. "The really interesting thing," Wells added, as if they were still in the interrogation room, "is that your own people tried to warn you. Those propaganda videos I showed you, all provided by the Vorkath diplomatic corps. They'd spent decades trying to correct this exact misconception among your more traditional elements." Krulthak's world was unraveling. He had dismissed the warnings from his own species as weakness, as contamination from prolonged contact with prey species. But now, trapped and hunted by the very creatures he had hoped to prove inferior, he was beginning to understand the terrible truth. "The Vorkat High Command sends their regards, by the way," Chen mentioned casually. "They're quite interested in using your case as a teaching example for others who might share your outdated views. Something about evolution of understanding and necessary cultural adaptation." The revelation that his own government was cooperating with his pursuit shattered the last of Krelthak's certainty. As the stun field finally took him down, his last thought was a horrible realization. He had never been the hunter at all. From the moment he had revealed his intentions on Nexus 7, he had been part of an elaborate teaching exercise, one designed to demonstrate exactly why humans had survived long enough to reach the stars. The observation room aboard the human vessel, anthropologist's dream, was eerily similar to his perch on Nexus 7, but this time Krelthak was seeing everything with new eyes. Dr. Wells had insisted he watch the ship's first contact footage, not as propaganda, but as a lesson in what he had failed to understand about humans. "Watch carefully," Wells said, gesturing to the holographic display. This was humanity's first encounter with the Swarm Collective. The footage showed a human exploration vessel meeting the Swarm half-ship. The humans' first reaction wasn't fear or aggression. It was curiosity. They attempted communication even as the swarm launched its first wave of drones. What happened next changed Krelthak's understanding forever. The humans adapted. Within minutes of the first neural invasion attempt, their ship's medical officers had begun developing countermeasures. Within hours, they had turned the swarm's own neural technology against them. Not through superior strength or natural weapons, but through something far more dangerous: innovation. "You see," Wells explained, "you made the same mistake the swarm did. You looked at our physical characteristics and saw prey. You should have looked at our history instead." The display shifted to Earth's prehistoric times. Krelthak watched as early humans, physically inferior to every predator they encountered, became the planet's dominant species not through evolution of natural weapons, but through tool use and social cooperation. "We were never apex predators," Officer Chen added from her position by the door. "We were something far more dangerous. Persistence hunters. We didn't need to be the strongest or fastest. We just needed to be smart enough to track our quarry and stubborn enough to never stop pursuing it." The revelation hit Krelthak like a physical blow. Humans hadn't evolved as prey or predators. They had evolved as something else entirely. They were pursuit predators who had turned their hunting strategy into a civilization-building tool. "Your people understood this," Wells continued, bringing up diplomatic records. "The Vorkat High Command recognized that humans represented a new kind of species, one that turned adversity into advantage. That's why they pushed for alliance rather than conquest." The records showed numerous instances where human weakness had proven to be strength in disguise. Their lack of natural armor had led them to develop advanced materials science. Their susceptibility to environmental hazards had driven them to master environmental engineering. Even their seemingly primitive emotional responses had given them an unmatched ability to form alliances with other species. "The truth is," Chen said, sitting down across from him, "we're not prey or predators. We're adapters. Every time someone has tried to hunt us, we've learned from them. Every predator species that came after us ended up teaching us how to be better hunters ourselves." The display showed humanity's first interstellar war, a brutal conflict with a species that, like the Vorkath, had seen them as prey. The aliens had superior technology, natural weapons, and evolutionary advantages. They had won the first battles decisively. But then Krelthak watched in fascination as humans did what they had always done. They adapted. They studied their enemy, learned their weaknesses, and turned their own advantages against them. Within a year, the aggressors were suing for peace, not because they had been outfought, but because humans had systematically dismantled every advantage they possessed. "Your mission to prove us prey," Wells said softly, "was doomed from the moment you conceived it. Not because we're stronger or better, but because the very attempt to hunt us makes us stronger. It's what we do. We learn, we adapt, we overcome, and then we teach others to do the same. The final footage showed human military advisors training Vorkath special forces, sharing the combat techniques they had developed. Krulthak recognized some of the moves Officer Chen had used against him. His people hadn't been weakened by human contact, they had been enhanced by it. The Vorkath High Command wants you to understand something crucial. Wells continued. The galaxy is changing. The old divisions between predator and prey species are breaking down. Those who adapt will thrive. Those who cling to outdated beliefs. He left the sentence unfinished, but Krulthak understood. His actions hadn't just been foolish, they had been regressive, threatening the very alliances that were making both species stronger. His attempt to prove human weakness had instead demonstrated why they were such valuable allies. As the realization of his error sank in, Krulthak felt something he had never experienced before. Shame not from failure, but from understanding. He had been wrong not just tactically, but fundamentally. Humans weren't prey disguising themselves as equals. They were equals who had achieved their status by turning traditional predator-prey dynamics on their head. The Vorkath High Command chamber was silent as Krulthak finished his report. The crystalline walls reflected the ambient light, creating patterns that seemed to mock his former certainties. He had chosen to return voluntarily, to face the consequences of his actions, a decision that would have been unthinkable to him just weeks ago. So, Elder Sixtel said, her scales shifting in what Krulthak now recognized as amusement, you set out to prove humans were prey, and instead proved yourself wrong in every possible way. Yes, Elder, Krulthak replied, his pride now tempered by understanding. I was wrong, not just about humans, but about the very nature of strength itself. The human delegation sat quietly at the side of the chamber. Dr. Wells and Officer Chen were present, along with Admiral Zhang, who had coordinated the entire operation. They had accompanied him not as captors, but as witnesses to his transformation. Tell us, Elder Kravnak rumbled, what you learned about true strength. Krulthak raised his head, meeting the Elder's gaze directly. Strength isn't about natural weapons or evolutionary advantages. The humans taught me that true strength lies in adaptation, in learning, in turning weakness into advantage. They never needed to be apex predators because they became something far more formidable. They became innovators. And what of their supposed weakness? Elder Sixtal pressed. Their need for cooperation, their emotional connections. What I saw as weakness was actually their greatest strength, Krulthak admitted. Their cooperation isn't a sign of prey mentality. It's a survival strategy more effective than any natural weapon. They don't just help each other. They help other species become better versions of themselves. Even now, they're helping us evolve beyond our own limitations. Admiral Zhang stepped forward, her movement drawing every Vorkath eye in the chamber. She moved with quiet confidence, unafraid despite being surrounded by beings twice her size, with natural weapons that could tear her apart. The Vorkath High Command and Earth's government have agreed, she announced, that this incident provides an opportunity. Krulthak's experience will be used to create a new training program, teaching both our species about the dangers of assumption and the benefits of mutual understanding. Krulthak felt his scales ripple in surprise. This wasn't punishment, it was rehabilitation. The humans weren't seeking revenge. They were turning his mistake into a teaching opportunity. Even now, they were adapting, finding ways to strengthen both species. Your new role, Elder Sixtel declared, will be to share your experience with others who might harbor similar misconceptions. You will work alongside humans, learning their methods and teaching our ways. Your failure to prove them prey will become a lesson in why such attempts are foolish. Officer Chen approached Krulthak, extending her hand in the human gesture of partnership, ready to learn how to be a proper teacher instead of a hunter. Looking at her now, Krulthak saw what he had missed before. The confidence in her stance wasn't bravado, it was the certainty of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of. Humans didn't need to prove themselves superior. They simply had to keep doing what they had always done: adapt, innovate, and help others do the same. "I am ready," he said, carefully taking her hand, "though I suspect I will be the student far more often than the teacher." "That's the first step," Dr. Wells said with a smile. "Understanding that everyone has something to teach, and everyone has something to learn. Even apex predators." As Krelfak left the chamber with his new colleagues, he reflected on how thoroughly his worldview had been transformed. He had set out to prove humans were prey, only to discover they were neither predator nor prey, but something else entirely. They were teachers, innovators, and adapters. And now, thanks to his own foolish attempt to prove them weak, he would help spread that understanding to others. The galaxy was changing, and thanks to species like humans, it was changing for the better. The old divisions of predator and prey were giving way to new categories: those who could adapt and those who couldn't. Krelfak had nearly found himself in the latter category, but humans, the very beings he had dismissed as prey, had shown him a better way. As he boarded the ship that would take him to his new assignment, Krelfak realized that he had achieved his original goal, just not in the way he had intended. He had indeed discovered a fundamental truth about the universe. True strength lies not in the weapons you are born with, but in the wisdom to keep learning and evolving, no matter how much it challenges your preconceptions.